we will now jump into um, teams and thinking about creating teams. So let me share my slides. And, and yeah. So we've already gone through the agenda for this evening. You guys have shared some community assets. Oh, before we dive into teams, we got to talk about the in-person gathering in Romney that happened this last weekend. Um, Noah, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you're willing to share a thought or two about the event, I would love to hear them.
Sure. So we did some hands-on activities uh, that you would be able to do with kids as kids gardening lessons. And this great thing happened. We were at the library and we somebody went downstairs and got some kids and brought them up. So instead of us just going through these activities as if we were presenting them to kids, we actually got to do them with kids and they just blew us away. They were amazing. Um, the activities that are pictured right here were creating art or recreating works of art using food. And these kids were just so into it. And then they just ate everything, which was great. It was it was so much fun to do it with the kids and to see their reactions and to see how they interacted with the food and the art. It was a lot of fun.
Well, thanks so much, Noel. Yeah, I thought so too, and was really impressed by all of the creations. And yeah, particularly Noel's. I emailed her that I had texted a picture of it to my dad, and he's like, "Wow, using the mushroom as the scream head was genius." And I think it's really true. So you can see in this picture on the right side, this is the work of art that was the inspiration for the fruit and vegetable art. So here it's Edward Munch's The Scream, and then right here, Monet's Water Lilies and Japanese Bridge, and then over here, Van Gogh's Sunflowers. So it was tremendous. And then another one of the hands-on activities was making grass caterpillars. So yeah, you as you can see in this photo, you fill some pantyhose or stockings with grass seed and soil mix, and then water your caterpillars. And like a chia pet, in a week or two, you've got hair sprouting from the caterpillars. So this is a completed version that I pulled from the internet on the right side of this screen of what the caterpillars will look like one day. So that's another hands-on activity we love. And then we also had a lunch provided by a local farm, which was wonderful. And then Tona Trice, who was a participant in the first cohort of Sprout School, gave us a tour of her kids learning garden, which was her project for cohort one. She planted a bunch of fruit trees and is excited to do more programming around them with youth entrepreneurship and agriculture. Yeah. So always great to get together. And our next gathering will happen in the Charleston area. We are just nailing down the dates for that. And once we have them, you all will be the first to know.
We have them.
Oh, we have them.
We
Okay.
have them.
You can hear
Uh,
the counts live, and so can I.
yeah, so January 31st and February 1st at West Virginia State, like the one we tried to do and canceled because WVU football and Marshall football happened on the same day. So nobody signed up. Yeah, it's a thing. Dylan's laughing. It's a thing. But we're doing the same agenda both days. So that way, if you can come as part of your job, you can come on Friday. But if you don't get to come as part of your job, you can come on Saturday. So that way you can kind of pick and choose which you would like to go. Come and like you guys are all invited. The first year is all invited, and then anybody else who wants to come is also invited. So it's going to be geared more towards like direct capacity building in the morning. We expect more than like 5 people at this one, hopefully, because it's in Charleston. So in the morning, it'll be more towards like grant writing, actual like hearing from folks who have built creative partnerships, kind of like Casey's going to do today. Um, and then the afternoon we'll split up and do like people that are just starting and people that are continuing. And if we have enough service providers, we'll do a third group that is folks that aren't really gardening with kids, but they're supporting other people who are gardening with kids. To kind of the first 2 groups will have fun activities. That third group, I hate to say it, it will probably be more of a conversation and facilitation to figure out how to move forward. So yeah, if you want to do activities, don't go in that group, I think is the lesson there.
Awesome. Thanks for that overview, Jenny.
Okay.
Okay. Well, before we jump into Casey's presentation, Casey's going to be talking about forging partnerships in farm to school work and give a specific example from our Maple in the Classroom program. So I just wanted to do a little overview of the Maple in the Classroom curriculum, and then I'll hand it over to Casey. So, Maple in the Classroom is a curriculum for grades pre-K through 12, centered around forestry and syrup production, specifically in Appalachia. So, these 6 lessons for each age group have activities like science experiments and tree tapping and syrup sampling, but there's also a connection to the history of syrup production and the stories that go along with that, and looking at on a map to see what is the region of Appalachia and where do maple trees grow within that region. So covers a lot of ground. It's very interdisciplinary, and these lessons are designed to like be completed over a series of days or a series of weeks in the classroom. And then along with these lessons, there's a cool opportunity to, yeah, tap some trees and make some syrup and potentially partner with a local producer to look at a site where syrup production happens to visit a sugar camp. So Casey is going to be talking a little bit more about those partnerships. And yeah, without further ado, I'll give it over to him.
All right, thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. And like she said, my name's Casey Withers, and I just want to give you a little bit of background about myself. So I'm from Pocahontas County, West Virginia, and that's where I currently live. And I went to undergraduate school at WVU, and now I'm working for Future Generations and am working there full time, and I'm also a student pursuing their master's degree. So if you're interested in that and want some firsthand feedback from somebody that's been kind of taking some of those classes, feel free to reach out to me about that. But so yeah, grew up in Pocahontas County. I've lived in West Virginia most of my life, lived in Morgantown for several years. But then after I graduated in 2015 and I moved to Oregon and Washington and moved around a lot there doing work through WVU for the Forest Service. So basically, I added a picture here of myself in Oregon at, I think this is John Day National, or John Day, yeah, it's a national monument, John Day fossil beds, I think. And this is called the Painted Hills for obvious reasons. And then if you can see me down here, you can see my actual body by the Future Generations University thing. But this is a big waterfall in Washington called Panther Creek Falls. And then this is me close to the Future Generations University office here in Pendleton County. And this is a place called Harmon Rocks. And then definitely had to add a picture of my cat named Kitty here to get her a little bit of shine. but you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So yeah, I'm the Community Education Associate for Future Generations, which pretty much means that a lot of the work that's happening at Future Generations in different communities, I can kind of get the opportunity to be the vessel for a lot of that to the public and vice versa, kind of gaining information from whether it's producers or just people in the public and giving that back to the university to kind of keep that open communication about what do people in the actual communities that we're working with want and need, and vice versa, doing the same thing the other way. But these are all pictures from let's say last year. It was this calendar year in February. So Margaret and Jenny can correct me if I'm off base on this, but I want to say that this particular Maple in the Classroom experience was the first one that got actually put in action into a public school, but I might be wrong about that. But regardless, we reached out to Hillsborough Elementary School. So the little town I live in right now is called Hillsborough, and I've lived there for, well, yeah, the majority of my life, really, but the past probably 5 years. And that's about the same amount of experience that I have doing agricultural work with young people. So about 5 years into that. And basically I had worked with the school from my previous job, which was at a small nonprofit called High Rocks. And we did some farm to school hands-on learning with the same school. And so basically, I already had a relationship with them and knew that they were pretty open to kind of doing educational activities that weren't necessarily the traditional just sit in the classroom all day, every day. So that was exciting and kind of part of why we reached out to them. And I live right by the school, but just wanted to kind of show some pictures that whether it's drilling the tap hole in the tree, tapping in the tap, basically everything. I kind of just told them what I wanted them to do and they did it. So I think that actual hands-on doing the thing that you're trying to learn is so important and so impactful at that age. But you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So just to give a little bit of background on some of the approach and process and tools that we use for community development projects at Future Generations is seed scale is kind of the method and the toolkit. And there's 4 kind of pillars of that approach. And I just kind of wanted to point this out, not necessarily that you need to know all 3 of them or learn this lingo that you see on the screen about bottom up, top down, outside in, but it does just give kind of a nice framework of how we approach community development. But oftentimes you'll kind of see like people want to be helpful to communities for the most part, and a lot of the time that perspective kind of puts you in a position of like, I want to identify a problem and try to figure out how to fix that problem. But if that were that easy, that problem probably wouldn't exist in the first place. So as we know, things are nuanced. But one thing I really appreciate about this approach is finding something that it has been successful in your community and something that people are excited about, and there's a little bit of momentum around, and you have some evidence that has potential to be scaled up rather than the opposite of what I just said. So basically, whenever we were looking at Pocahontas County and thinking about Maple in the Classroom there, it was like, okay, we already know a lot of proactive educators that are in the agricultural lane in Pocahontas County. So we have existing relationships to build upon. We are, I've worked with the school. We've had success with them. So kind of building from success and forming a 3-way partnership, making decisions based on evidence rather than opinion. And then that 4th step of just kind of ultimately what you're trying to get to is behavior change. And pretty much you're just going to kind of iteratively be doing your work until you get it down the way you want it to go. But yeah, if you're super interested in any of that, seed-scale.org is where you could find out some more information about that approach. All right, so that three-way partnership we talked about. So in this instance, it's pretty much future generations, the elementary school, and this local syrup producer, and their company is called Hillsborough Maple Works. And in the same sense, that three-way partnership was already formed in my previous job, but I didn't even know what seed scale was. So it was like I kind of once I learned about what seed scale was and looked back on some of the community projects that I've done, I'm like, oh, a lot of the times whenever these projects were successful, we actually kind of were following the seed scale method without me really even knowing that. But um, so whenever I worked at High Rocks, it was pretty much Hillsborough Elementary School, the same school. High Rocks and myself were almost acting as the maple syrup producer in the Maple in the Classroom example. And then I don't know if this group has met Erin Nair before, but she works for West Virginia Food and Farm Coalition and WVU Extension, the Family Nutrition Programming in Pocahontas County. So um, whenever I was working with Hillsborough Elementary School and I worked at High Rocks and we were doing collaboration with Erin, she pretty much had the curriculum ready to plug and play. And us at High Rocks had the actual like high tunnel and farmland that was within walking distance of High Rocks. So that's kind of, I know you all have been doing asset maps, but with our farm, our nonprofit farm at High Rocks, with it being within walking distance of the elementary school and us trying to do youth ag education work, it's like, okay, they should really be able to have some time to come over here and get this worked out, which I'm really happy that we were able to do that. But there's a few themes, whether it's the High Rocks work or the Maple in the Classroom programming that we're doing at Future Generations now. There's been some consistent themes that have made those things successful. So, like I said, forming three-way partnerships, starting small, and building trust. And you can go to the next slide. So yeah, Margaret talked a little bit about some of the curriculum behind Maple in the Classroom, and these are the materials that you would receive from us if you were to choose to implement Maple in the Classroom. Excuse me, which we would give you the size drill bit that you need, 10 taps, 10 buckets with lids, two food grade 5-gallon buckets, basically all the materials that you would need to be able to tap, collect sap, and make small scale batches of syrup in the classroom. You can go ahead to the next slide. So I think I've pretty much talked about this enough, but just kind of hammering home that these three-way partnerships, part of why they are part of why we do three-way partnerships is because we kind of need people from grassroots, from the bottom up. And in this instance, and as you're doing this, you're kind of always wearing different hats. Sometimes you feel like you're the outside in, sometimes you feel like you're the bottom up, on and on. But Hillsborough Maple Works is the syrup producer. And speaking of asset maps, again, this elementary school where this syrup producer lives and where I live, it's all probably within a 5 mile radius of one another. So if you were doing that asset mapping, that's a great way to just kind of really see spatially like where people are at. And the further you can kind of define who you're working with, and obviously you would know the organizations, but then if you can actually like list out the names of people that you can get work done with, I think that's also another good activity. But um, all right, you can go to the next slide.
Actually, before you jump to the next one, can you just take a minute and explain like outside in, top down, bottom up? What does all that lingo mean?
Okay, so in the three-way partnership that you form, you want to have um, one entity from the bottom up, which is like I was kind of alluding to this earlier, but this is pretty much the people in the community that are doing the work. Um, that can look a lot of different ways. So in this example, the bottom up are kind of almost the teachers and the students and the syrup producer that was involved in this. The outside in is going to be normally somebody or some organization that's providing some sort of kind of innovative way of doing something. So for us, it was just kind of providing an innovative educational program that is ready to implement, that there's materials, there's curriculum, and will and support to help get that done. So that's where Future Generations was kind of acting as the outside in agent during this. And then the top down, it's basically kind of who's setting the parameters for what you can actually do. So in this particular example, the top down is almost pretty much the principal of the elementary school because she kind of dictates if we're able to implement the programming at all, how much time do we have to do that. She kind of sets the parameters on how we can operate. So hopefully that was a good enough explanation.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you, thank you.
Yep. But yeah, a lot and like I've met Sherry multiple times before, but kind of with the value added work that we're doing, it's kind of like West Virginia Food and Farm Coalition and Future Generations are the outside in entity. The top down is the West Virginia Department of Ag or the FDA, really anybody that's kind of setting the regulations and the parameters that you have to work in. And then the bottom up agents of change in that example would be the actual value added makers themselves. But yeah, I think starting small is super important because it's really easy to get super excited about what you're learning and you want to implement this information and apply what you've learned. But if you don't have if you don't have strong partnerships and you don't have a solid plan and you kind of bite off a little bit more than you can chew at first, it's really easy to kind of lose that opportunity that you have because a lot of us that are in this room right now that have worked with schools, it's not always easy to get your foot in the door with them. So I really like Maple in the Classroom because it has this pre-made curriculum with materials. It's ready to plug and play, and a huge part of it, I think, is that it is aligned with the educational standards of the state. So it makes it really easy for the school to actually say yes rather than just you're somebody that wants to do something that's innovative and it would be a cool experience, but if it's taking up some of the time that they already have really limited time anyway and they have certain parameters that they have to hit, and if you're not helping them do that, I can see where it's kind of easy for them to turn you down. But that's one positive thing about Maple in the Classroom is those educational standards are already being met through this curriculum. So that's like a sigh of relief that the principal and the teachers and the admin can kind of take off and be like, oh, okay, like this actually will still count towards what we need to do and hit the objectives that we're trying to hit. But I will say, so this picture in the middle and this picture to our right, that's from Hillsborough Elementary School, Maple in the Classroom. And then there is one other example of Maple in the Classroom that's really close here to Future Generations. And pretty much everything that I'm saying about Hillsborough sort of holds true to their example as well. It's just some of the variables are slightly different, but this is Chris Grimes, and they are a maple producer at Mountain Cajun Getaway, and he's a veteran, and they do a lot of work to support veterans and host retreats at their property, but also do Maple in the Classroom with young people there by elementary school that's right by their house as well. So I think you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So these are SMART goals, and I'm not really going to harp on this all that much, but I did want to throw this out there since I was talking about starting small. But if you're making a goal about what you're trying to do with what you've been learning with Sprout School and you're trying to implement a project, I would encourage following this guideline of SMART goals because it's helped me kind of be pretty much what all of this says. But basically, you'll get more specific rather than just having like a broad goal. So start to narrow it down a little bit more, and is what you're doing measurable? But what I really wanted to touch on, especially with the whole theme of like starting small, is what you're doing actually attainable in scope for you, for the school, for your partners? Is it realistic? Like, do you have a time bound deadline to kind of keep things on track? So you can find out a lot of information about SMART goals if you Google that. So I think that's about all the time I'll spend on that there. But I did just kind of want to point that out that whenever you're starting small and trying to implement some sort of project, just try to make sure that you're doing something that's attainable in scope and that is realistic. Um, okay.
I'm so glad you included that because our third learning lab, which we'll introduce in December, actually is the project plan. And as you're making the project plan, there's a section dedicated to thinking about SMART goals. So yeah, this slide in the presentation is very timely. All right, we'll keep going.
Yeah, so okay, where we at? We're starting small, we're building trust, forming three-way partnerships. So, like I have already alluded to several times, I had worked directly with this school before, and I'd worked directly with this maple syrup producer before. So there was a lot of trust already there. And I don't think if that wasn't there, I don't think that if anybody just kind of approached them with Maple in the classroom, that they would have been so quick to implement it the way that they did with somebody that they've worked with before. So that can take a lot of time. Built the you know with this being such a small rural community, I'm from there, so most of those people already know me in general. And then on top of working directly with that school, that's kind of how I was able to build up trust. But that could look a lot of different ways. Maybe they won't let you implement the project that you initially pitched to them, but you're like, hey, I'll come by and volunteer, and we'll have this one flower bed this year and I'll help you maintain it for free. You don't even have to do anything. So basically, getting your foot in the door, trying to build some trust, you may need to volunteer a little bit to do that. But I think just pretty much whatever you can do to try to build up some trust, and relationships and all of this are really important. So if you have existing relationships as you're forming these partnerships and defining who your team is, I would I would recommend to just like really lean on who you know and who you know that you can effectively work with and actually kind of be able to implement these projects and move this forward. And that's I just kind of shared this to once again, with such a small little rural community, there's only so much to talk about and write about in the local paper. So they did a story on us, and that last picture was from a field trip that the school decided to do. So I can't remember the exact timeline, but it was February 2024, like the first week of February, that we actually tapped the trees at the school property. And then probably a month later, it was so rapid fire. That's why I was pretty happy a lot of this stuff was already outlined because things were moving too fast to really like completely come up with a full effective plan on the fly. But basically just pointing out that timeline to show how rapid that happened and just how cool it was really cool to see of them kind of allowing us to come in and provide this programming and then how quickly on board the the syrup producer was at jumping because he was just really excited to try to be able to do something in the educational lane rather than only making and selling syrup. But they took a field trip to his sugar shack, and they're planning to kind of continue that forward every year, as far as we know. But um, you can go to the next slide. And this is just another picture from that same field trip. So you can keep moving through. And they did the same thing at this mountain caging getaway that I referenced here in Pendleton County. And each time I was able to be at both of these field trips, and they were definitely a little bit different for various reasons. But one thing that they did at this mountain caging getaway trip was whenever the kids came over, they cooked pancakes and sausage and had maple syrup. So that part was really cool. And then with the Hillsborough Elementary field trip, um, which leads me to another thought. One main difference between these two operations of Maple in the Classroom was the Hillsborough Elementary School. They were they were collecting so much sap actually that I had to get the maple syrup producer on his daily sap runs to just kind of make the school be part of his sap run. So he would come through and pick up their sap and take it back to his sugar shack and just use it to produce syrup that he was already making. So the Hillsborough folks, they actually didn't necessarily make maple syrup in the classroom. They were more collecting the sap and then did the field trip to Trevor's place, the producer's sugar shack. But whenever they did do the field trip, Trevor had these really small plastic bottles that he had bottled up some of the syrup. So each kid got and teacher got a little bottle of syrup to take home that they could basically say that they helped or they did collect the sap out of the trees and in turn pretty much kind of helped make that syrup. So that part was really cool. And then the main thing that kind of stood out to me at this mountain caging getaway field trip was just actually getting the chance to eat some of the syrup. So you can keep going through. I think this is my last slide, but this says your business team. I pulled it from some other work that we've been doing, but I did kind of peek ahead in this slideshow and saw that you all were kind of moving towards developing your teams, and I just wanted to kind of point out how important I think that is to really truly be able to define like who's on your team and who's a part of your project and really kind of parsing out the roles and responsibilities of each person and having that be shared and agreed upon rather than you want this person to do this thing for you. Um, but yeah, kind of keeping everybody on the same page and kind of having that understanding. The three-way partnerships also it really helps spread out that the shared responsibility that you all have to kind of complete this work. That way, you know what to expect from your partners. They know what to expect from you. Your roles and responsibilities have been agreed upon. Now you know what you're doing moving forward, and it's not kind of just up in the air. But whenever you're defining your team, some notes I wrote down here were just think about relationships and partnerships. I've mentioned that even already before this slide, but who are the specific people and the specific organizations that you're working with? And identifying the roles and responsibilities. And then, yeah, pretty much your team doesn't have to just be like your coworkers or people that you work with. So our team for Maple in the Classroom, in the Hillsborough example, it would include Trevor, the syrup producer, obviously many members of the school, many members of future generations, and probably even some other people that don't come directly to the forefront of my mind. But I think that's pretty much all I have.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Casey, for coming to speak because everything that Casey talked about will be so relevant as you all are thinking about, yeah, building your teams to complete your Sprout School projects. And before we dive into the instructions for Learning Lab 2, building your team, I just wanted to pause and see if anyone has any questions for Casey. And while you're thinking about questions or adding them to the chat, I thought about a question. And I don't know, Casey, when you were like on these field trips and working with students, did you get to hear any reflections from students about the experience and kind of what they thought of the whole thing?
Um, I don't know about necessarily reflections on like how the programming went or anything like that, but a lot of insight on what they'd been learning. So kind of as we were doing the field trip and we're going through kind of the whole process of like, okay, you all actually tapped trees. You see how we're collecting sap for the most part. So Trevor's picking it up in his truck. So he brings it back here. Now let's go through the rest of the process that you haven't seen yet. And as we were kind of going through everything piece by piece, there would be little questions or something that would come up that we'd like pop on the group of like, so blah 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 blah, and they would be super excited to be able to answer something that they had learned in the previous couple weeks to kind of keep that moving forward. So that part was probably one of the coolest parts, and I think the best way that I could answer your question.
Yeah, no, that's one of my favorite parts of teaching is to see those light bulbs going off and the connections being made between experiences and knowledge that yeah, students already have. So that's great.
I have a question only because Casey's talked about it to me, but I don't know if he's talked about it to others. During this whole process, what was one of your biggest kind of, I would say the first two-parter. What was your biggest hurdle you had to deal with? And then what was your biggest surprise, as far as kind of everything and how it all got implemented programmatically?
um I would say the biggest surprise was just like once we tapped the trees, it was good timing by us, but the sap was flowing so well that they were collecting so much that they were pretty much running out of space to store it from the materials that we gave them and everything like that. So that was probably the biggest surprise was just like how quickly they accumulated so much sap and there's not really any way to kind of keep up with that with the materials that we give you, in my opinion. I mean, I could be wrong, but because we give you in a little electric kettle cooker that you can cook down the sap with and make syrup in, but whenever the sap is flowing at that rate, it's kind of hard to keep up with it all, especially because they have their whole school day to run. This isn't like their full-time job to make syrup in the classroom. So basically the um, you asked me about surprise and the hurdle. I don't know that there were any like huge hurdles because there would have been if Trevor wasn't there. So it's super important in my personal opinion and just experience to have a maple syrup producer involved. Not all of them are going to be able to like actually pick up the sap from the school and make it at their sugar shack. We're in a pretty lucky situation where the like I had mentioned, Trevor and I live on the same road, and we live probably like 3 or 4 miles from the elementary school, and he's already out and about every day during maple season anyway, collecting his sap. So it was really easy for him to make that part of his routine, and he provided a big, probably like 50-gallon barrel that they could store their sap in more. So basically, having him to lean on helped me not have to have any hardcore hurdles. But if he wasn't there, that probably would have been the biggest hurdle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
think
I'll,
Casey did.
oh, go ahead, Jay.
I was going to say, I think Casey did a really good job. He may not have known that's what he was doing, but like having that plan B, C, and D ready to go. Um, when things like this was the case of things going too well and actually probably going better than any of us ever expected because they only had 10 taps and they were pulling like between 10 and 20 gallons of sap a day sometimes, and that's like unheard of unless you hit perfectly. And so this is the case of like the high tunnel full of cucumbers. Like that is my mapping to this is oh no, we have a bunch of cucumbers now we have to make pickles. This is what Casey dealt with.
Yeah, and as Casey was saying, like last year was the beginning, like to formalize this process of Maple in the classroom and doing it in schools. And so Chris and Mel, they only tapped 5 trees and still had an abundance of sap. And so we sat down and talked to Mel. Chris and Mel are the syrup producers in Pendleton County. And Mel said, it actually works really well if you have 3 crock pots instead of one to do it in the classroom so that you can have the sap at different stages and keep up with the amount of sap you're collecting. So it's all like good information to have. And as we're giving teachers information about how to make sap in their classrooms, all of this information we've gathered in this first year will feed into the information that we share in future years. Okay, well, we'll keep going and jump into Learning Lab 2. Who is on your team? So this is our team at Future Generations on the right side of this slide, a few of the members of our team. This picture came from the West Virginia Small Farms Conference this year. And you can see Casey. Jenny was the one taking the picture, so I think that's why she didn't make it in it. Or maybe she was off running somewhere else, doing a workshop. But anyway, this lab is all about, as Casey said, just figuring out the folks that you want to work with to complete your project. And the Learning Lab has 3 steps. So step number 1 is kind of your dream team. If you could work with anybody in your community, who would you like to work with? And then step 2 is to actually like reach out to folks to tell them what you're thinking about for your project. And then step 3 is to formalize the team and the people who are going to work with you on your project. So we give you guys a month to finish this learning lab because it takes a little while to reach out to folks and figure out who you want to have help you. And this is not set in stone in any way. Just like the ideas that you brainstormed in Learning Lab 1 are just brainstorming, we're not holding you to those. Same thing for this Learning Lab. Like if your team changes as you're completing the project, that is totally fine. It's just an exercise and all those things that Casey was talking about of thinking about coming into a project with the support that you need to complete it. So that's Learning Lab 2. Anything else you want to say about this one, Jenny? Okay, sweet. I love Jenny added this Haitian proverb. Jenny worked in Haiti for a couple of years, and this is something that my grandmother in Appalachia has been saying since I was a little kid too. Many hands make light work, and I think that is a great part of working as a team and sharing the responsibilities. Okay, well, we paused for questions earlier. If you got them, as always, Jenny and I will stick around at the end of this call and we can answer any questions that you have. But we're getting close to 8 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and end by saying we'll meet again in 2 weeks to talk about program evaluation and the project. So SMART goals, as Casey gave us a preview of tonight. And I know that's the week of Thanksgiving. So if folks are busy, that is a-okay. The session will be recorded and we will make sure to share it with you all. And then just, putting this here as well, that the second Learning Lab will be due in a month. So 4 weeks from today. And then that's when we'll introduce the third Learning Lab, which is the project plan. And also just thinking down the road, that session, Brittany Barnett
Bartlett.
Bartlett. Janie Barnett is a family friend. Brittany will be coming to speak to us about the Try This program. Some of you guys might be familiar with Try This West Virginia, but they've got this fantastic mini grant program, and it's a really cool way to build on your Sprout School project. And we've already talked to Brittany about combining Sprout School and Try This, and she's really excited about it. So that will be coming up on Tuesday, December 10th, not November 10th. I see my typo now. Okay, everybody. Well, with that, we'll say goodbye. Thank you all, as always, for being here. And yeah, hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your evening. Bye.